organization that I co-founded called 0 Hour, and we are working on a lot of great campaigns to turn out the vote, to educate folks on climate justice, and to mobilize folks around legislation, common sense climate action policy. So that's a little bit what I do, and I just graduated high school a month ago, so I am also a recent high school graduate. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. And what's the name of the campaign, Jamie?
Well, 0 Hour's campaign is called Vote for Our Future, with the 4, so vote for our future, and it's how we're mobilizing young people to vote, and we're also endorsing like down ballot candidates as well, like people running for Congress and different progressive folks, trying to win office.
So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so pretty much, electoral politics is not the only way to make change. There are so many other ways to make change that we also focus on and emphasize, but we're also working towards, on making sure that, because young people have historically low voter turnout, and so we're trying to fix that, and we're trying to make sure that there's a high voter turnout amongst young people, and that we're also supporting candidates that support the work that we do, and that really support progressive climate action. So we are endorsing like very progressive candidates as well.
Great. We're doing a whole Instagram, Twitter, social media, so we can promote you and your book and the campaign. So thank you for your personal accounts. Is there one for the Vote for Our Future?
You can just go to thisiszerohour.org. Really, that's the best way to find out about all of our campaigns. And then they can also follow us on social media. It's just the @ symbol, and then This Is 0 Hour for all accounts.
Wonderful. Now, you're not old enough to vote, right?
I am. I'm 18. I actually just voted for the first. I was a surrogate for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and I worked a lot. I worked very closely with the campaign, and I spoke at many of Bernie Sanders's rallies. And I'm actually a delegate. I think I'm the youngest delegate in the Democratic convention. I'm going to be casting my ballot for Bernie at the Democratic convention. So this election was my very first voting election, and I got to cast my first ballot in my life for Bernie Sanders, someone that I was very passionate to campaign for. And I'm also exercising that right in terms of being a delegate at the Democratic convention.
So, but didn't you have a little idea about, because the young people that you're talking to aren't able to vote. They're not old enough to vote.
Not all of them. Some of them are.
No, the ones that you're talking to this
morning.
Oh,
right. Sorry. I thought you meant like in general. I was like, no, I mean some are.
These young people that you're influencing right this minute. So what can they do?
I mean, what you can do right now, if you can't vote, you can still, there's still so much you can do. I mean, if you want to influence an election, you can still influence your parents. You can work with the campaign. I've worked with campaigns since before I could vote. You can work with the campaign. You can do phone baking. You can work on trying to get the vote out of other people. And you can also just work on being an organizer and trying to support different causes that you care about. Like a vote is just one tiny part of making change. And even if you want to, electoralism is really where you want to make change, then like, a vote, you can influence your parents' votes, you can influence the votes of those around you, and you can work on turning out the vote for other people, which is what I did back when I was 14 and couldn't vote.
When you were 14. So we have people that are 14, 15, 16, 17. So Jamie's one of those that's been doing this for a while. She's a published author. I just got your book. I'm so excited. I think I was one of the first to sign up for it, so it just arrived.
Oh, I'm so happy. That's so
Me
cool.
too. So when we get together, you'll have to sign it for me.
I will, definitely.
Okay, so let's have Jerome's video, Jack, if you would, and we can cue up to him. Just so everyone knows, our first day with 3 guest speakers, so.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jerome II. I'm from Washington, D.C. in the United States, and I'm 18 years old. I'm the executive director of 1 Million of Us. I'm also the co-editor-in-chief of the Climate Reporter, which is one of the largest growing youth environmental news publications. I'm also really excited and honored to be one of the 100 people featured in this book, Stone Soup for a Sustainable World, Life-Changing Stories of Young Heroes. If you're in the U.S. and you're eligible voter, please go to 1millionof.us and register to vote and become one of the million. Also, if you're outside of the US, go to medium.com/the-climate-reporter. Thank you for listening. Bye, everyone.
Hey, Jerome. Nice to have you with us. We're so excited. So tell us your story, Jerome, because you're there right in the nation's capital. Wow. You're going to have you have a book inside of you too. I know you're working on one.
Yeah.
What a time to be in Washington, D.C. So tell us your story and tell us about you and your passion.
Yeah, so growing up in DC since I was like 5 years old, I have always seen protests happen almost every single week about whether it's gun violence or racial equality or climate action. And it's just been in my world of organizing and advocating for elected officials to take real action. And I think that's really has been a major influencer in my life is being in Washington, D.C. But as I got older, like I continued to have my parents go out and allow me to go in the forest and just be into one with nature. And I went out and said, this is insane that people are trying to destroy this and are trying to decimate our entire ecosystem for the continuation of a mindset of extraction and pollution. And I continued organizing, and one of the biggest things was me organizing for Jamie for 0 Hour, and that gave me a lot of like really deep insight about how to organize the movements and how to really understand how grassroots movements can take hold in America. Very recently, in March of 2019, I founded 1 Million of Us, which was really out of the work that I had done in DC, working with March for Our Lives and Women's March and all the different movements that I had so much knowledge around. And just in being in DC and seeing that every single day everyone's talking about things and seeing that the same message is being presented at the end of the day is saying, go out and vote, because politicians aren't listening to us in the streets. They're only listening to us if we're going to the ballots and voting our values. And that's what I saw, is that Women's March only work with March for Science for like a couple of ways and for different campaigns. But I was wondering, how can we build these connections to be even stronger, where all these movements can talk to one another and also build this major movement to vote and actually make sure politicians are seeing us as one united political force, still rallying and championing for different issues, but still centered around the youth vote. And that's really what made 1 Million of Us be a huge influencer for me, is that that's a huge tipping point, is that 1 Million of Us is half of what happened between 2016 and 2018. In 2016, only 10% of young people voted. And in 2018, 21% of young people voted, which is around an increase of 2 million young people. Now, if we have another million young people that are taking to the streets, that's another huge percentage bump that we have. And if we have a movement that's creating a coalition around this, then that's going to create more and more energy for young people to not just feel that their voice isn't being heard, but actually feel that even if their voice isn't heard, they're still a part of this movement. And that even after the ballot box, we're going to organize town halls together, and we're going to do lobby days together, and we're going to work together to make sure that our politicians are actually listening to the issues that pertain to young people most. And that's really the work that 1 Million of Us is doing, is we're creating summits. We're trying to do different events. We're trying to do so many different initiatives to be able to bring young people around voting, and also providing the work that we do for organizations. If an organization organizes an event, we have GOTV resources, where if you're under 16, we send you a text message, and on your 18th birthday, you'll get like a notification saying, hey, go out and register to vote. And we have, we're setting up weekly conference calls, where if you're in a certain state, we're gonna have people walk you through the ballot and walk you through what date is the election, what's the last day to register for it, what website do you go to just to figure out how to vote? Because voting is extremely complicated and extremely boring. And that's really the hard part of it, is making it exciting, making it accessible, and making it where people are knowledgeable about going to the ballot, where you can't just say you're going to register to vote and go to the ballot and know none of the candidates on it. We have to educate people around what the candidates stand for and how we're going to support them. And that's one of the things that we're also doing, is setting up town halls in local areas, because the presidential election is very important, but also local elections are important as well. So a lot of our local organizing and local chapter leading is one of the biggest things that 1 Million of Us has, is our chapters at high schools, colleges, and community centers. We did have a lot more, but COVID-19 happened, and we basically had to cancel a lot of our big events that were going to go through the South and go through the North and just travel between chapters. But we still have the chapters. They're still doing a bunch of digital stuff, and they're still just being amazing. There's so many young people. We have 27 chapters, and 3 of them are XQ Super Schools, where they're going around and teaching young people at other chapters about how to vote. And it's just amazing to see that once you just talk about voting and give that space for making sure that voting is the first priority, it just creates a huge snowball effect where people are excited about learning. They're excited about how can we talk about voting in a way that doesn't seem like it's for older generations and not for young people. And that's really one of the biggest things, is taking our vote back, just making sure that young people don't feel overwhelmed whenever they go to vote.org, or feel overwhelmed whenever they go to congress.gov. And it's like walking them through and making sure that they have that political literacy. And that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to serve as an organization.
Thank you so much. And so these young people, they live in a town of New Bedford, Massachusetts. It's a Democratic state, but it's a pretty traditional New England town, a little on the conservative side. And not a lot of people of color in leadership positions. So could you speak to us a little bit about why that's important, that they talk with their families about that, Jerome? Would you mind?
Yeah, I don't know specifically about that community, but if that community does have a large person of color population, I think that it's really important to see yourself represented, because it's just the similarity of, if you sit a child in front of the TV for hours and hours and don't say anything to him, if you sit a Black child and a white child right next to each other, the Black child will feel inferior to the white child just by watching what's around him and being in his surroundings. And I think that once you have a person that looks like you in a position of power like Congress or in any form of government, it is really impactful and powerful to see that. And also it helps to diversify our solutions and diversify how we tackle problems, because Indigenous folks have different approaches to solutions than Black and brown folks and white folks. They have such a deep bench of knowledge that we haven't tapped into yet. Is because we haven't given them the opportunity to really advocate for their communities. Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing you can do is have community-wide calls and talk through it and try to figure out how you can organize the community in the way that they see is the best way possible.
Wonderful. And I think we might even have a few on our summit this year that might think about running for office. Have you ever thought about that yourself, Jerome?
Yes.
What do you think about young people running for office?
Yeah, I definitely think that is huge. Like in New York City and other states, like young people need to be at these seats of power. Like we feel like so overwhelmed just opening any website. And I think that has to change, and just the messaging around the government. Like I used to intern for Congressman John Lewis, and it was not conducive for young people. It was like, it wasn't that well in tune with technology. It was just really old school. And we're like, I was trying to like give suggestions on how we can spruce it up, make it more 21st century. And it's like, that's just not the norm. And I think if we have young people in these offices, like AOC, she's basically transformed her entire office. And it's totally different from a lot of other offices. And you won't notice it unless you've like been in one office and then been in another office for a long time. You're like, wow, this is completely different. And I think when we have more and more young people in the offices like other countries have, then you're gonna have just a revitalization of our government really working for young people. So yeah, that's really important to have young people in office, just to freshen up our government and make it so it's more representative to every demographic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerome. That was inspirational. Appreciate it. So, Scott, we're going to listen. You've been doing this a while, Scott, and one of the things that in the book is so meaningful for me is that we have some people who've been doing this since they were young, and now they're a little older. So you have that seasoned wisdom, and you have grown something pretty awesome. And I'm so happy to introduce you to, when I asked you if you knew Jerome and Jamie, you didn't know them. So I'm really happy because they're awesome and you're awesome. So tell us about,
that.
You're welcome. We'll get your video later. Tell us about Generation Citizen, please.
Yeah, so
and you.
So I do feel a little more seasoned, but it's always great listening to young people like Jamie and Jerome. I mean, they're why I do this work, and they're why even in times like this, I have a lot of hope. I founded Generation Citizen about 11 years ago. My background is I'm originally from California, but I grew up around the world in Latin America and East Africa because my dad was in the State Department. And so a lot of experiences seeing democracies first coming into their own. I got the opportunity to see the first truly democratic elections in Kenya's history in 2002. I saw a coup in Ecuador in 2005, runoff elections in Zimbabwe in 2008, and realized how excited people were to participate and have the opportunity to make a collective difference in their community and country's future. But also how democracy is something that we constantly have to mold and build upon and improve. So I was first involved in international activism when I was in college in the U.S., but realized, and I think this panel has sort of exemplified it, that young people really do want to make the world a better place, but don't always see politics as the way to do so, for a whole host of reasons. But largely because a lot of times politicians aren't speaking to the issues that they care about, and the system's not working as it should. And one of the reasons is that we don't really teach civics in school anymore. And we do, it's here are the three branches of government, here's how a bill becomes a law. And so started Generation Citizen as a way to figure out, how do we transform civics education? How do we ensure that schools are really teaching young people how they can participate in politics, and how democratic participation in civics can be the most exciting part of what an education is all about. The original purpose of public schools were to cultivate the next generation of citizens. And so we work in middle and high schools across the country and ask young people, what do you care about? What do you want to change? Ensure that they understand the root cause of why those issues are problems in the first place. And so they're tackling issues like climate change and sustainability. We're seeing that in spades. Police brutality, which obviously is in the news right now, our young people have been talking about for a long time. And just having really creative solutions, largely using local government. And I think you're seeing right now in this country, young people refusing to accept the status quo, re-envisioning what a better democracy and society can look like. And for us, we want to be part of those efforts, and we want to ensure that young people like Jerome and Jamie are speaking truth to power, and that's what Generation Citizen is all about. So yeah, started a while ago, but for me, as much as the organization can ensure that young people are at the forefront, that's what we're all about.
So tell us about your story, how you got started.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, I got really interested in democracy through growing up abroad and just seeing in the streets of Kenya, how excited people were to cast their first votes, and how motivated people were in places like Zimbabwe to fight for a better democracy. I was first involved in activism relating to the genocide in Darfur, Sudan, when I was in college in 2005 to 2009, and was going down to the Rhode Island State House and helping to pass divestment legislation, and really seeing the difference that politics can make. But also seeing how politicians weren't really paying attention to young people, and how a lot of young people didn't have the same opportunity to participate that I did. And so, got started as a college senior and thought, well, what if we give young people the opportunity to use their voice in local politics? So started Generation Citizen when I was 21, and 11 years later, we're still going strong.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Well, let's give everybody a big hand. This is like such an inspirational moment. Is there a way to have 3 on the same screen, Jack, or how do we do that? We can just, the other guys aren't being seen, right? So we just do a gallery. Is that how that works? Sorry, I'm learning with everyone else. Gallery view. Let's see what we can do. So Jerome and Jamie and Scott, can we see their faces? Jack, can we see them at the same time? There you go. Scott, there you go. One more. Scott, there you go. Woohoo!
Yeah.
So you guys, why don't you talk to each other about what you're up to? And we got 15 minutes to just kind of, and if we have any questions, they're going to be in the chat. We're just practicing. These guys are all new to this. So we may get a couple questions from our team. Do you have any questions for each other to get the ball rolling?
Someone asked me, how did we come up with the name 0 Hour? I guess, because we have 0 hours left to act on climate change. It was really, this is an urgent situation. And so we wanted to come up with a name for an organization that was just conveyed a sense of urgency and conveyed a sense that was like, okay, there's no more time to act. So we need to do everything that we can. And so that's where the name 0 Hour came from. That's just answering a question in the chat. But yeah, I mean, what are you guys up to right now other than what y'all talked about?
Well, I'm curious for you all, we touched on this a little bit, but just in this moment right now where there's so much change and uncertainty, what's giving you the most hope? What are you all doing to ensure that young people are at the forefront, and what's giving you some sense of optimism about the future?
I think that a lot of people talk about hope. I think that a lot of people talk about the fact that we have to be hopeful. But I think that the best thing that drives people isn't hope. It's the fact of urgency. It's the fact of like, if we don't do something, we're going to have a terrible situation for the next 4 years. I think that the hope is seeing that young people, hope just comes from action, honestly. It just comes from organizing. It comes from creating movements that you see actually make some change, like how Black Lives Matter Plaza is now right in front of the White House and right where climate strike. And it's like, it's crazy to see that that's the hope that we get. But the fact is that we can't just name a street. We can't just do these marches forever. We have to have people in office. We have to have people that, we can't keep begging people for 10 years. So I think that the hope comes from electing people in office. A lot of hope runs dry after you have like 10 or 20 marches. The hope actually comes in after you see a piece of legislation that gets passed in Congress and the Senate. And I think that's what gives me hope, is whenever I see a piece of legislation going in, or when I see a new march that's actually advocating for real changes, like defund the police, or supporting the Green New Deal, and actually seeing some Congress members or senators co-sponsor that bill right after that march. And I think that's the hope, is that seeing that we're going to have some change.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that framing a lot. And I think that the urgency and righteousness that I think young people are acting with right now and refusing to accept the status quo, like you all, makes a lot of sense and is very necessary. And I guess going off that last point, one of the things that I've been thinking about is it's interesting to think about how frustrated young people are with politics and with government. But Jerome, you said that one of the things that happens is, hope comes when legislation passes. So I'm curious, and this is something we talk about a lot at Generation Citizen, but how to, when young people are deeply frustrated and distasteful about politics and government, how can we get young people to help reimagine what democracy and politics can actually look like?
So if we had one message, one of the things that we do through the summit, this is our 16th year, and we always get citations. We request citations from the governors, from the senators, from the representatives of the states that the young people are from. So this year it's Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So, and we present those. We started off the opening ceremonies. We had our Native American medicine man board member who did a prayer with us. And then we had one of our young people reading the citation from Representative Kennedy, for example, who is from their district. And then all of those elected leaders then receive the same binder and swag bag that you got. So they can hear the young people's voices. And right this week, the young people are writing about, they have the whole section every day right after you on youth voices. So what do you think that they can say to their elected officials? What kind of messages? Because both Massachusetts and Rhode Island are Democrats, but there's different kind of Democrats for sure. And in general, we would like to have them start to think about the reality that they have the right and the responsibility to speak to these elected officials about what's important for young people. So could you talk about that? So because when they say goodbye to you, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerome.
Okay. Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is the misconception of partisanship. And I think that there's Democrat, there's Republican, there's Progressive Democrat, there's Tea Party Republican. There's so many different names for different things, but the fact is it's just up and it's down. It's just the people that are donating to political campaigns are donating to Donald Trump and Joe Biden. They're donating to everyone. And I think that once we communicate that this isn't a partisan issue, it's not football, it's not the Super Bowl, this is our lives as policy, this is things that are gonna impact our lives, I think that's when we really have change, is that there's just a mindset shift when you talk to Republicans that speak to Democrats. I first came into the climate movement by working for Citizens Climate Lobby, which is all about bipartisanship and advocating for climate action and talking to Republicans and talking to Democrats in the same room. So I really got a good impact of like how Republicans see climate change versus how Democrats see climate change. It's very different. But when you come together in the same room, you all understand that the fossil fuel industry is lobbying for horrible things. And I think that if you just message it that we just have to band together because there's power in numbers and there's power in money, and we have the numbers but we don't have the money, we're gonna use our numbers to the best of our ability. And I think that that's one of the most powerful things, just communicating how we've been divided, but before this we were united. Like George Washington's farewell address, he mentioned that the United States should not fall into partisanship because it will basically destroy our moral fabric, and that's exactly what's happening. And if we just go back to that original premise of the United States, then we'll be more united than ever.
I think, someone in the chat asked me, for the youth of today, why should we want to vote? And for those who can't vote yet, okay, so there's 3 voting questions. One about lowering the voting age. To that, I'll go in order. I'd say that I think it would make a big difference, but even people 18 through like their 20s have very low voter turnout. So yes, lowering the voting age would really help, but it's also like making sure that polling is accessible, like going to the polls and going to vote is accessible, and getting rid of all of these boundaries that make it difficult for people to vote, like voter restrictions and things like that. The youth of today should want to vote, which is another question. Why should youth want to vote? Because that way, we can actually have politicians and people in office who actually reflect our values and reflect what we want. So that's why we should want to vote. And for those who can't vote yet, you can work on a campaign by simply like reaching out to like a campaign website via email. With social media and with the internet, it's quite easy to find a campaign, reach out, and then just get plugged in, and then you can move up the ranks and go from there. And so, yeah, that's really, I guess, why it's so important to vote. And, voting isn't the only, like, electoral politics is not the only change. Legislation is not the only change. There's also a lot of great community work, grassroots work, and communities making things happen for themselves. And so it all doesn't have to come from politics, but it is important that we get involved in those systems as well.
Yeah, no, I would agree with all of that, especially on the point that there's so many different ways to get engaged. Voting is one. Pressuring elected officials, really focusing on specific issues, I think is I think oftentimes we put too much into individual politicians, especially at the national level. I do think lowering the voting age is something that needs to happen. I actually think 18 isn't the greatest age to start voting at. There's a lot of countries around the world that have 16 as a voting age. 18-year-olds, either they're going off to college or they're in the workforce. If we could get 16 and 17-year-olds to vote while they're still in school, I think that there's something very powerful to that, and I think it would actually increase voter turnout. You're seeing a few towns in Maryland, Tacoma Park, Hyattsville, Greenbelt, that have done that and started to see that too. So there's a whole host of things that we should be doing to improve our democracy. But listening to young people and lowering the voting age to 16, I think, is something that's very important too.
Scott, do you have a link to that, getting 16-year-olds to vote? Is that on your site? Is there something on there that we could promote about that?
Yeah, so Vote 16, our campaign's at vote16usa.org. And so that's something that, that we've been pushing for a while and are really excited about. Yeah, you can check it out there.
It's vote16usa.org?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great. We're just going to be, reposting this and your videos and so forth. So we just wanted to do what we can, to shine the light, Any last thoughts, Jerome? Last message? 1 million of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. One last message is that 2020 is one of the biggest years that we can take action. And if you're trying to be one of the million, and if you want to have resources from 1 million of us and all our partner organizations, go to 1millionof.us and sign up for our newsletter, or start a chapter, or join it, become a member. Just send us an email. We respond really fast. We are trying to mobilize so many people, and 1 million of us is a huge goal, and we need a lot of people to help us reach that. Thank you.
Perfect. Jamie.
For those of you who want to connect with me, you can just hit me up on social media, just with my name, Jamie Margolin. And if you want to learn more about organizing and activism and how you can get involved and how, you can use the power that you have to make a change, you can read my book, Youth to Power, which is out now at www.youthtopowerbook.com. And I put the website in the chat as well. And if you want to plug into 0 Hour, you can also go to thisiszerohour.org. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I really appreciate it. And you all have the power to make incredible change in your communities. So I hope that you harness whatever talents and powers that you have to do what you can.
Awesome. Great work, everyone. Thank you so much. We really wish you well, and we're going to be watching and spotlighting and shining the light on all of you. So thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. This is great.